Welcome back to our panel discussion, How a Multi-Cloud Approach Can Help Agencies Meet the Mission, sponsored by Ironbow Technologies, Dell Technologies, Intel Corporation, and VMware here on Federal News Network. My guests today are Brian Merrick, the Director of the Cloud Program Management Office at the State Department. Rocky Campione is the Chief Information Officer at the Energy Department. Jamie Holcombe is Chief Information Officer at U.S. Patent and Trademark. And Troy Massey, Director of Enterprise Engagements at Ironbow Technologies, and Melvin GREER, the Chief Data Scientist of the Americas at Intel Corporation. And Brian, something you said earlier caught our interest, and that is the COVID or the pandemic effects have had not just a social, but also a pretty big technological effect on a lot of federal agencies, especially as they move to this hybrid environment. And now nothing is on premises, neither the data nor the applications nor the people. So in some sense, elaborate on that, the COVID effects on this whole cloud migrations, and what are some of the variables that it brings to the whole equation?
Sure. So, as you can imagine, being global and COVID hitting different host locations at different times, that definitely created a lot of challenges in the agency to share information and to continue working. Our mission is critical. We can't stop. And so, within a 2-week period, 85% of our agency started teleworking full time. And just to put that in perspective, I mean, most of our folks culturally are into the last 3 feet. That's how diplomacy works. So this was a major cultural shift and a technology shift. And so what we found was that a lot of the legacy applications and ways of doing things, wet signatures on memos, just became untenable because you couldn't physically get to it. So it really shed a light on the need to modernize and to rethink how we do business. And so there's been a renewed interest in increasing mobility, issuing out more mobile devices. We're using proxy servers to get at a lot of our on-prem application workloads, and that's certainly not optimal. So there's definitely renewed interest in those things that were just good enough to be on-prem before, but now that you can't really get to them well, definitely need to rethink how we actually access that information. And then the next challenge is going to be hitting really, at least domestically, is that as people start to go back to work, we're still going to have quite a few folks in the workforce that remain teleworking or mostly teleworking, while we also have folks that are on-prem still relying on our traditional network and desktop infrastructure and whatnot. And so the challenge we're running into now is supply chain around getting cameras, mobile devices at scale, how we're going to manage that across the enterprise and shift those resources. And then how we're going to make sure that the people that are working in cloud platforms for collaboration remotely can also interact with folks that are back in the office who may not always have access to that because of the secure locations they're sitting in. So it really is bringing all of the policy considerations and the sort of work-life convergence realities of where we are with COVID now sharply into focus. And so our agency is really moving forward in terms of addressing that by relooking how we're managing technology, the types of hardware and endpoint devices we're putting out there, the way we're looking at what types of workloads should really be in the cloud. Even though we might have traditionally looked at it before from a normal cost basis or end-of-life basis, certainly the accessibility basis is now becoming one of the primary drivers in some of these workloads.
Sure. And is that true also at Energy, Rocky, where you've got a lot of federated components there?
Yes. Yeah, no, it's, I think the first thing I want to talk about here is when we moved into a maximum telework environment, we were blessed that over the last 3 years, our now secretary, but then his deputy secretary and my predecessor, Max Everett, had spent a good bit of time improving business processes within the department, not just at headquarters, but across the complex. So we moved very rapidly into a maximum telework environment, and our finding were in some places even more efficient in a telework than we might have been in an on-premises environment. But then also, I think as Brian would have alluded to, there are some of our missions that just have to happen on premises. But what we've learned when we're talking about cloud is one of the benefits of cloud is you can move data closer to where it needs to be. Not everybody, so that you can have a speed of access. Not everybody has to kind of come back to the central location. But our architecture right now with TIC, everybody comes into the department, then goes back out to the cloud, and we're just finding that some of the ease of use and speed really isn't there. We were very blessed that our senior leadership and our appropriators helped fill that gap in a supplemental where they gave us money to help move from a TIC 2.0 to a kind of TIC 3.0 environment and a zero trust environment, so that as we roll that out, we can get folks to their data safely in a more efficient manner. So we're finding that one of the benefits of cloud that we never really realized before COVID was that ability to have data close to where you need it, and more easily accessible. What we're doing now is making sure that we have the architects and the security in place so that we can do that, and that's through a number of different initiatives, but one mainly being kind of zero trust, kind of under that TIC 3.0 heading.
Yeah, so Jamie, we've heard of both architectural considerations, application considerations, and cybersecurity requirements have been altered by the whole pandemic work situation. Also at USPTO?
Well, I'm happy to report that we really didn't have a miss in step at all. My experience is a lot different than the other speakers because we had such a large workforce that already telecommuted. So of our 13,000 employees, 8,000 or so are examiners. And we had established a telework program in the 2011 timeframe where they were all able to work out of their homes. So as serendipity would have it, in the January timeframe, we were getting ready to go to the cloud, and so we doubled our bandwidth in order to move the large data sets that we were anticipating. Well, as luck had it, we were ready to go and scaled up. So we went from 18,000 to 14,000 simultaneous VPN connections overnight. We did have to scale up our licenses, and we had to, of course, put more hardware in some of our server clusters. But overnight, we were able to accommodate and were able to not miss a step. So much so that our productivity numbers for examiners, which we measure as part of our fees, we're not a taxpayer-funded agency. We get our money from the fees we collect. Anyway, our productivity metrics for turnover and acceptance, rejections, awards, everything is through the roof. And that's because no one is taking vacation. So it's an amazing thing. We kept on going. It's a little different because of our mission.
All right, I guess if you need money from a revolving fund, go see Jamie, perhaps. But Troy,
I'll talk to you tomorrow, Jamie.
Yeah, Troy, what do you see in terms of the cybersecurity effects as this pandemic-related atomization maybe hit what activities agencies were already engaged in with respect to the refactoring and the general motion toward the cloud that's getting to be more and more related to the mission critical applications?
Yeah, security is definitely a key conversation in what we talk about when, Brian and Rocky had mentioned keeping the data close to the end user, and the end user is now a remote user. And what classification of data is he or she needing? And so there's been developments to where now you can actually get a virtual desktop to your home presenting SIPRnet. Now, I retired out of the Air Force. That was something we did behind a cipher lock door, and we locked our hard drive in the safe when we were done. So that type of technology is amazing. The other key that we need to, this is like factor number 25 of multi-cloud analysis, is what happens when we all go back to work. So if we talk about yesterday, which was January, everybody was talking about the cloud initiative, but COVID wasn't an issue in it, and the remote user wasn't a conversation that we had about this. Today, remote user is very critical. We need the data close to the user, so that becomes critical. What happens when COVID's over or controlled and people start returning to work? We need to implement a design that works now and is not software when we return to work. So that design needs to be very, very mobile in a way that gets the data where the user is, which is hopefully back in the office.
Okay, and Mr. Greer, data, again, that's kind of your specialty. And is there an effect from, I mean, the pandemic has given rise to huge data analysis activities related to itself, but has it had an effect, do you think, on the architectures and the way agencies should approach all of their cloud data management?
It absolutely has. And what I can tell you is that Intel has taken a two-pronged approach when it comes to this pandemic. Clearly on the internal side, we were more like Jamie. We had a lot of folks who were already doing work from home and taking advantage of virtual desktop and being able to do VPNs into our internal network. We certainly were able to quickly ramp up to extend our security posture to all of these remote users and provide global round-the-clock access to our networks in a secure way. But the thing I think I'm most proud of around Intel's response to the COVID pandemic was the external things we did. So within 3 days, we were able to stand up a cloud-based data lake for lots of data around virus research, the synthetic biology capabilities and tools and methods that would be needed to be deployed in order to build a virus and a remediation to the virus, the ability to engage our entire ecosystem in a cloud-based set of initiatives focused on our pandemic response technology initiative. We funded about $50 million into this initiative. So we're quite excited about the sharing of our technology to folks in the cloud. And so this external piece has really been something amazing to see.
All right, and in about the minute that we have left, Brian, I'm going to throw it to you, and given all the ground you've covered with cloud deployment, just give us the lessons learned in the 60, 75-second version.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is everyone needs to realize that the cloud just doesn't work the way on-prem does. And it's really critical to have highly trained expert folks on your teams working on it. And you definitely need to have a strategy, an approach on when you're going to use what tool so you can use the right tool for the right job. And understand your data and understand your mission. And by kind of guiding off that, it's going to make it a lot easier to make smart choices about how you leverage technology to have a mission outcome.
So it sounds like you're prepared really for the next wave of cloud deployment with some of the spaces that you've had until now.
Oh yeah, it's moving forward exponentially, and what we're really doing now is moving into more product focus, as one of the earlier speakers said, and we're really re-engineering the way we manage IT across the enterprise from an automation standpoint. So a lot of exciting things are coming out of this time, as difficult as it's been. But yeah, the pace of change is just exponentially increasing right now.
Okay, on that note, I want to thank today's guests. Brian Merrick is the Director of the Cloud Program Management Office at the State Department. Rocky Campione is the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Energy. Jamie Holcombe is the Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Troy Massey, Director of Enterprise Engagements at Iron Bow Technologies. And Melvin Greer, the Chief Data Scientist of the Americas at Intel Corporation. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. You're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Iron Bow.